If you've experienced shame in your life, then this message is for you. Today I want to talk to you on how to live a shame-free life. How to live a shame-free life. As I began searching for truth concerning shame, I first looked to the scriptures, as I usually do, to see what the Bible has to say about shame. What are the words that are used in the Bible concerning the word shame? And are there any remedies that are available in order for us to deal with shame? I began by looking at the most obvious case of shame and embarrassment in the Bible, that experienced by our first parents. And I turned to the second chapter of Genesis, where the Bible says, "And they were both naked, the man and his wife, and were not ashamed." Upon reading this verse again, I was surprised that our first parents were neither ashamed nor embarrassed. I had heard numerous explanations for this absence of shame. You know why they were not ashamed? Because they were made in the image of God, which meant that our first parents were initially covered by a Shekinah-like covering of light or glory. Now, the expected self-reaction to their nakedness prior to the fall should have been shame or being ashamed, but there was none. Adam Clarke, in commenting about the nakedness of Adam and Eve, observed that shame can only arise from a consciousness of sinful or irregular conduct. Through the fall, therefore, Adam not only caused mankind to be subject to all kinds of demons, diseases, and death, but also to shame. Innocence was lost because of sin, and shame entered the scene. If you read Genesis chapter 3, 10 and 11, the Bible says, "And he, Adam, said, I heard thy voice in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, and I hid myself. And God said, Who told thee that thou wast naked?" You see, Adam and Eve became fearful of their father. This is illogical when you consider that God had never done anything unkind to them and had in fact greatly and lovingly blessed them. And upon feeling this fear, they hid themselves from Him. Notice, after sin, their attention became focused upon themselves. Adam and Eve were still in the likeness of God after they had sinned. Their physical bodies had not changed one bit after their rebellion. But what happened was they lost the covering of the Shekinah-like glory which formerly surrounded them. Because when they sinned, they lost their covering of righteousness, and the corresponding covering of light vanished. They were uncovered, but probably remained unaware of their loss until it was pointed out to them. The word naked would not have existed in their vocabulary until they heard it from Satan. The Hebrew word rendered naked in the Genesis passage literally means may bear. And that is exactly what Satan did to Adam and Eve. In the way he mocked them for their condition, they realized that they had been made bare. That is, they had lost their covering of light. I remember Lance Armstrong many years ago, who confessed to doping, using performance-enhancing drugs to win the Tour de France. He was stripped of his titles and his Olympic medal. I can only imagine the shame he felt, especially because the world came to know the truth. You see, shame is found in many places. And Genesis 2:25 tells us that when man was created, he was naked and he knew no shame because man was innocent of evil. Then along comes the crafty serpent who tempts Adam and Eve to eat of the forbidden fruit. Lured by the promise of becoming like God, Adam and Eve disobey God's command and sin enters into the world. Their eyes were opened and they realized they were naked. Then they heard God coming. So Adam and Eve hid because they were ashamed. Where sin exists, shame is sure to follow. Where sin exists, shame is sure to follow. That is the way it is designed. You see, the Bible paints shame as a negative emotion that comes from guilt or an awareness of wrongdoing. When Adam and Eve heard God, they knew their sin would be exposed and they were afraid because they were ashamed. You see, shame is not a pleasant feeling. The problem with shame is that most Christians don't know what to do with it because we have failed to understand the purpose of shame in our lives. Have you ever noticed there are a lot of products on the market today that have printed on their label, use only as directed? Because when you use something in a manner other than that which it was intended for, you may find the ultimate result is the opposite of the desired effect. Adam and Eve realized from their sin that the result was the opposite of the desired effect. God comes to Adam and Eve and asks them this question: who told thee? You see, God makes it clear that Adam and Eve would not have come to this conclusion on their own. Their shame had to be the result of an external, outside judgment imposed from another source. Self-consciousness and shame usually result from outside criticism. For some of us, in the form of reactions, comments, or attitudes of others. In the garden, shame entered the scene because of an external judgment to which Adam and Eve were susceptible. Why was Satan so eager to shame them and to point out their nakedness? Think about it. Because he himself had experienced the shame of nakedness. God the Father had stripped from him all his majesty and honor and removed all the badges of his rank like a demoted soldier. The account in Ezekiel tells us so. Because formerly Satan was clothed with a Shekinah-like glory and splendor that caused him to become prideful. He wasn't able to handle the glory of being in the likeness of God in his pre-fallen state. It corrupted him, and now he hates all those who are in the image of God. Verse 17 indicates that he was not only blessed with beauty, but also with the brilliance of the Shekinah glory of God. But you see, he lost all that. And today, he is jealous of God's greatest creation, man. And he seeks to mock and ridicule those who are naked. And he desires to see every living son and daughter of God stripped of his righteousness and glorious state. He exists today covered with shame. And ever since his own fall, his goal has been to instill shame in man, and to accomplish that end, he utilizes all the degrading forms of human activity to bring man to shame. You see, shame stemmed from a loss of covering in the same sense that righteousness serves as a covering. Shame stemmed from a loss of covering in the same sense that righteousness serves as a covering. This morning I want to leave with you 3 warning signals of shame that if you deal with, it will help you to live a shame-free life. Number 1, shame will keep you stagnant. Shame will keep you stagnant. You see, shame is the depression of our spiritual lives. We don't want to go anywhere. We don't want to do anything. We just lay in the same place, mopping around because we aren't perfect. You see, much of shame, as we will see, relates to feeling different and in some way inadequate. Not as good or worthy, not as powerful, intelligent, lovable, or acceptable as someone else. When we live thinking we are not good enough or that God's grace is not strong enough, and we do this, we cannot grow. For some of us, even more than sin, shame is a barrier in our relationship with God. The feeling of having your sin uncovered and exposed is crippling and terrifying. So we walk around with the shame that we try to hide, and even when we can admit it, we find ourselves unable to let go. The second warning signal about shame is that shame will overwhelm you with a sense of unworthiness. Shame will overwhelm you with a sense of unworthiness. Imagine you're watching the Olympics. All these different skaters come out with their impressive performances. Now in the Olympics, the athlete is judged on the difficulty of the routines and precision and grace which they carried out. So in evaluating, you're looking for the overall quality of performance in seeing how many errors they make, as well as the complicated ways in which they perform each task. Now as a judge, what would you do if one of the skaters came out and just slowly skated in a circle? They took no risks, they didn't do anything challenging. Sure, their performances might have been close to perfect, but nothing was noteworthy. Anyone could have done what they did. Oftentimes, when we hold on to shame in our lives, that is exactly what we do. Rather than trying anything or doing anything, we just skate safely around. That is the effect that shame has on our spiritual lives. It keeps us trapped in this fear of failure so that we are reluctant or unwilling to do anything. We cannot experience the fullness of God because we consider ourselves to be unworthy of it. The third warning signal about shame is that shame will hide the power of God's love in your life. Shame will hide the power of God's love in your life. You know, shame makes us view ourselves as lowly, filthy creatures that are unlovable by God. But accepting that God offers grace to others is one thing, but for us it's another. After all, how could God love us after what we have done? We know when shame takes hold of our hearts, we cannot feel the love and grace He offers because we view our own mistakes as being greater than the love and mercy of God. With this, we essentially reject the power of God's love on the cross and the significance of the sacrifice of Jesus because we somehow allow ourselves to believe that our sin is greater than His sacrifice. And in doing so, without even realizing, we are rejecting Jesus because truthfully, shame is a result of a lack of faith in the power of God's love. So dear online family, shame removes the covering, but righteousness brings the covering. The first Adam lost the covering, but the last Adam brought the covering with his robe of righteousness. So the secret to living a shame-free life is to become the righteousness of God in Jesus Christ. Think about it. Have a great weekend.